Let's just say that you're really high status and I'm relatively new. If I fear that I don't belong enough to be able to really come out and speak my truth and disagree with Victoria, I'm going to hold back. And that's, again, why it's so important to build that sense of belonging, that sense of feeling known and understood and valued as a baseline.
Welcome to Discovering You, where personality meets possibility. I'm your host, Victoria Theriault. On this show, we dive deep into what makes people tick and how understanding that transforms the way we lead, work, and connect. Hi, listeners. Hi, Heather.
Hi there.
What is your color today? Also known as, how are you feeling?
My color is yellow, high energy and pleasant, and how I'm feeling is optimistic, hopeful, and confident about the future. What's your color?
My color is also yellow. I have a word that I haven't had before, which, always excites me. And I'm surprised that it's yellow. So the word is challenged.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Would you see the word challenge and maybe see it a little bit like a negative connotation?
Yeah, for sure.
So on the How We Feel app, challenge is described as feeling pushed to reach a higher goal. Well, again, you can interpret that two different ways, but I think for me, I just have a lot of stuff on the go and I just sort of felt very focused about, okay, I'm going to get this done and I'm going to get this done. So it felt like positive energy, but I do find it curious that it's in that high energy, pleasant category. Because challenge, often that would be seen as a struggle.
Yeah, that's how I thought it too. We learn something new every time we do this.
Don't we? We always do. Okay, so World Food Day is coming up, and it got me thinking, how would disc show up as flavors or spices? So here is disc as seasonings. High D is cayenne, strong and spicy, and it's red, so that's on brand. High I is basil, sweet and fragrant. High S is nutmeg, warm and comforting. High C is turmeric, crisp and healthy. Okay, I almost didn't pick this one because it's tricky to pronounce. Okay, so I looked it up. Technically, the right way to say it is, okay, bear with me, turmeric. But more colloquially, people say it as turmeric. How do you say it, Heather?
Turmeric.
Okay, so you did kind of say the R there, whereas I think a lot of people drop the R. Apparently, that's acceptable now. We have moved to that. Do you have a favorite spice or seasoning?
Cinnamon. I guess that's not a spice or seasoning.
No, it's a spice. Believe me, I took a deep dive. It is a spice. I was going to have this disc as spice, but then technically, it's going to make me say it again. Turmeric is technically not a spice. It's a seasoning.
I'm not even going to lie to you. I'm a pumpkin spice person. I am the person that people don't like because I am all in the fall on pumpkin spice.
Okay, I can accept that in the fall. When Starbucks releases it at the end of August, I become enraged. And I'm not exaggerating.
I like pumpkin spice muffins. I like pumpkin spice lattes. I like pumpkin spice cheesecake. I like pumpkin spice everything.
Wow.
I am all in. Frank even gets me pumpkin spice cold foam that I put on my coffee at home. Yeah, but then it's over. I am a solid probably 3 weeks and then I'm done.
I agree in that. Well, don't kill me. I don't love pumpkin, but I agree that the fall is kind of like cinnamon season. There's things that I would maybe crave or want to have because of the season. And then you're right. It's done. It's kind of like, okay, I've moved past that.
Cinnamon I could do all year. And it's a Christmas thing for me too. But pumpkin spice, I am a strict, it's for the fall and then it's out.
Literally, it was the first one I thought of when I decided I was going to do this and I didn't end up using it. It's really hard to make it fit a category. And then most of these ended up being more on the savory side, which not necessarily, because I think both with nutmeg for sure and with turmeric, it can be in sweet recipes as well. But I also enjoy cinnamon and apparently it's really good for you. I just read this recently.
And so is turmeric.
Oh, I know. That's why it got the healthy. I felt bad because probably they're okay, but I'm like, how do I make this fit into a high C mold, but yes, turmeric is very, very healthy for you. I personally love cilantro. I didn't choose it because it's very divisive. So I don't know about you, Heather, but depending on your palate, if you're an undertaster or an overtaster, it comes across differently.
Oh, interesting.
To those who hate it,
you did do a deep dive,
right? This has been a long conversation because I have friends and I'm like, I can't get behind this, but they have explained it to me. So for those who hate it, apparently it tastes like soap.
Oh,
that's gross. But personally, I can't imagine having Mexican food without it. I love Mexican food and it's just part of the flavor. So
yeah, we are a big cilantro house too.
Yeah, same. And apparently there's no mid ground. I know it's one of those things where some people, the aversion they have to it is because of that.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, look at that. We're learning all kinds of super important things about cilantro. Okay, we're going to resume part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Vanessa Druskat, who's an award-winning researcher, global speaker, professor, and author. I have had great feedback about part 1 of this episode. People are really enjoying and connecting with what Vanessa has to say. So if you didn't listen, you may want to check that out first. We left off talking about the word argue and how it can be interpreted very differently based on personality styles and team culture. Not surprisingly, people who are more direct and comfortable in a conflictual environment, high Ds, they see the word argue as a necessity and a way to move forward to achieve results. Those who are lower Ds often regard it as destructive and belittling. So interestingly, I've done 2 workshops in the last 2 weeks, and this came up both times. A lot of teams will say, we don't argue. We avoid it at all costs. But when we replace the word argue with debate, it takes on a new meaning, and we can see the importance of good, constructive conflict, which Vanessa calls creative abrasion, and the positive results this yields. So let's jump back into our conversation.
When you're debating with someone, it forces you to get really clear about what you're thinking. So if I'm saying, this is how I think we should facilitate the team, Victoria, and you say, no, I think we should do X, and I say, no, I think we should do Y, then I am forced to take my instinct, bring it up to my head, and communicate why I think Y is so much better. You're forced to think of what's so great about X, bring it up. And everybody learns from that forcing. Our brains want to conserve energy. It's fascinating when you start digging into the neuroscience. Our brains like to be lazy. They like to conserve so they can do a fight or flight when it's necessary. That's the reason. So if it can be done quickly, they want to do it quickly. If your brain is forcing you to debate, you will just call up all kinds of information that's useful for the team. And that's where innovation, that's where learning comes. And that's going to spark something from someone else. It's going to say, nice point, Victoria. This is what I was thinking. And someone else is going to say this, and they're going to have to gain clarity. And that's just how teams work. If I'm not allowed to disagree with you, or I'm afraid, let's just say that you're really high status and I'm relatively new. If I fear that I don't belong enough to be able to really come out and speak my truth and disagree with Victoria, I'm going to hold back. And that's, again, why it's so important to build that sense of belonging, that sense of feeling known and understood and valued as a baseline to then all the good work, all the good decisions and problem solving that we're going to put our team's collective brain toward coming up with.
Exactly. What I love is you give some examples of the fact that, this won't necessarily be peaceful, and how some strategies to rein some of it in to get what's great out of it. So you talk about, let's say people are interrupting, over talking, but you can talk about reining it in. And I love some of the examples. One of them is called free Whine cards.
Oh, yeah.
And listeners, it's spelled WHINE, but see a little wine symbol on the card. And you also have yellow and green cards. Can you tell us a little bit about what role they play?
Absolutely. So there has been this really interesting research on why people conform in teams. So coming back to the NASA example, why didn't those other engineers sitting around chime in and support? Well, you got the hierarchy, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens when we're in a group, if we're watching the brain and we're about to disagree with someone who's got status or disagree with the group, our brain literally sends us an error message. It basically says, look out, you're about to upset the apple cart. Are you sure someone else would have brought this up if it was that important? We never knew that that's what the brain did. We used to think that people would sit there and say, well, I want to fit in, so I'm just not going to disagree with Victoria. Well, that's not what happens. Your brain is saying, dangerous territory. That's what brings up this norm of why you need these Whine cards, why you need these yellow and red cards. Because you have to continually remind people that you want to hear their real, true, authentic ideas, their agreements, their disagreements. It's okay to disagree with people. That's the norm. So we call this norm support expression. And the free Whine card does this by, I learned this from a guy named Ed Staub, who was in a workshop I did once, pulled it out of his pocket. It's a little business card sized Whine card. He said, I would give these to my team members, and they couldn't keep using them. They were limited to the number of times they could whine, but they were allowed to disagree, and they could just pull out their Whine card and say, I'm pulling this out now and using it.
You talk about the importance of having these little tools, and another thing that you talked about, and I was like, I might be something I might have to incorporate, especially if you have someone who is domineering the conversation or really taking it up, and it's a little shaker.
Yeah, little shaker, big shaker.
Again, to your point, it's sort of the agreed upon things beforehand, so something doesn't startle someone in the middle of it. I think by creating norms, right? By creating a framework that everybody understands, they won't necessarily feel embarrassed or called out. It's like, this is what we do. These are our tools. And I think that is so helpful because we so often find ourselves in those uncomfortable situations like, oh, how do I stop this person now? And, as a facilitator, it can be a challenge, right?
It's a real challenge. And again, the psychological safety makes a difference in whether or not you feel like you can. But you also have to be motivated to do it. So often when people don't feel a sense of ownership and belonging in the team, they're not motivated. Belonging motivates you to want to do it. But let me just give you one more quick story about that. I don't think I write about it in the book, but there was a leader of a Boston hospital who was brought into, the hospital was not doing well financially. So he had to really make big change. So in his boardroom, he brought in a hat. I always picture it as I've heard these, these are stories. I didn't work with this team, but I've heard this story over and over again from people who were on that team. He brought in this hat that was like a construction hat that had lights on it. You could flip the switch and put the lights. He put it in the middle of the boardroom table and he said, anytime you feel like you're not being heard or you want to disagree with the flow of what we're doing, or there's an elephant in the room, which basically means there's something no one's saying, I want you to put that hat on your head, flip the lights on, because that's the only way, if everybody shares their information, it's the only way we're going to be able to turn this hospital around.
Wow.
And so people didn't have to actually put the hat on their head. They used to just say, we got a hat issue. I got a hat issue. And you had permission. It was the norm. You had permission to do it.
So important. One of the things I'm wondering is that your work with teams has been global and it's spanned decades. I'm wondering if your findings, so your EI model that you've come up with, is that applicable to every size of a team? And what would be the smallest team you've done it on? What would be the largest team you've done it on? I'm very curious.
It's a great question because we are often asked to work with very large teams.
Yeah, I imagine so.
The largest team we've worked with had 23 people on it. And I was really hesitant to do it, but it ended up working really well. They worked in subgroups a lot. This was a very high-level leaders team. He just wanted all those people in the room. And it worked phenomenally well for them. So they just agreed to these norms. They agreed to use them in their subgroups. That was the key. But let me also say a lot of that was because we turned that leader around to really agreeing with it. I also worked with a team that was around that size once, and the subgroups didn't connect. There was a hierarchy among the subgroup that we could never really work with. And that's what happens sometimes when you have subgroups, is that one subgroup gets higher status and the others don't get hurt. It's easy to get rid of that when you've got a size of 12 or 6.
Sure. Yes.
You talk about it and you can flatten that hierarchy as a norm, but it's harder in a bigger team. So it takes effort and intention.
For sure. And I guess a lot of it does come down to the leader, right? And in terms of the message that they send. So I think it's probably inevitable that you've encountered teams or individual members on the teams that are skeptical and reluctant to undergo the process. Do you have any advice for team leaders listening or facilitators on how to get those people on board?
Well, I got to tell you, most teams that I've worked with are skeptical when I walk in the room. Just like you said earlier, they think it's just going to be kumbaya. And, I had one team that my colleague and I walked in the room and they basically shot angry. What do you think? We don't need team building. We just need the people in this team to work harder.
Oh
You
my
know,
gosh.
and that's always the way it is. If they all worked as hard as I do, that's really an indicator that you're not working together. You're not sharing information. The best thing I can do, first of all, is get the team leader on board early on, so that the team leader knows this is going to happen and that's okay. Second thing I do is I always have the team leader tell the team at the start, why this, why now? Why do I feel like we need to get it together now? What's looming in the future? What are we not doing now that requires this kind of work? And then I rely on the research. I show them the research, I show them the data, and I say, this is what the great teams do. The model that we built is all based on the research that we've done over decades, showing you what the great teams do that typical teams don't do. And that's basically what we're looking at. At the same time, I want teams to own the model. And so I'll come in and I'll say, this is what the great teams do, but you have to adapt this to your own needs. It works a lot. There's always some resistance. So one more thing I do is I often start the meetings. Maybe you do this already, Victoria, with everyone bringing in an object or bringing to the Zoom meeting an object that shows the kind of team they want to build.
So what kind of objects or things have people brought?
So this is a really great activity I learned from a good colleague of mine named Gitu Barwani. She taught it to me. And basically, they have brought in, one of my favorites is a Swiss Army knife.
Oh.
And basically saying that, we're all different. We all have a different task. But together, we're there and we're ready for anything.
Oh, wow.
Other objects, we also say you can bring in a photo. We cast a wide net on it. Of course, there's always a few people who forget to bring anything and they have to make it up on the spot. So it's whatever they had in their office or whatever they have on them now. But people will bring in trophies that they won from their old rugby team or something, and how great, and they'll describe the feeling of being part of that winning team and what made it so special. They kind of get in their own head around what a good team can be.
Right.
And they hear it from others. And I think that sets up. There's also a vulnerability required to show your object.
Yes.
Opens them up a little bit.
I love that. So, Vanessa, you refer to yourself as an introvert. We talk a lot about introversion and ambiversion, extroversion on this show. What I'm wondering is, do you think that this has helped you become the Jane Goodall of teams, as you have to be such a keen observer?
Yes, absolutely. Most people who study teams are keen observers, and most of us spent a lot of time on the outside looking in and trying to figure out what was going on. I just think that was part of who I was when I was young. It's why I remembered so much that race in Kenya when I was told that I had, broken the norm, and it was devastatingly embarrassing for me.
I'm sure.
Probably did help me. But, again, you have to learn how to be an extrovert. And so I spent a lifetime getting in front of classrooms and making myself comfortable. Let me just tell you an anecdote. I had a colleague who did a whole run up on me of all he was getting his doctorate in counseling psychology, and he did this whole run up of all my characteristics. And he said, "Oh, you're an introvert like this. You are never going to be able to stand up in front of an audience and ask good questions." At the time, I was young and I was thinking, oh my gosh. Well, guess what? No.
I hope you sent him your TED Talk, Vanessa.
I should. We do it. I mean, come on, that's the thing. You learn to live in the world you want to be in, right?
Well, also the thing that I think is really misunderstood about introverts is what drains introverts is that shallow kind of surface conversation. But if they're talking about something that is very meaningful and important to them, they're invigorated by that. And
right. It's a good point.
I think that's the difference, right? This is something that's important to you. It's your research. It's what you know. It's what you eat, breathe, sleep, drink. That's what it is, right? On the note of you being the researcher, I think that a lot of people who are scholars and experts bump up against criticism of being too theoretical and not practical. What I'm gathering, looking at your resume, so to speak, is you seem to be a really rare combination of a researcher as well as an implementer. You don't just study this stuff, you execute it. I'm curious, do you identify with one more than the other?
I do. And to be honest with you, I really identify with the research side.
Yeah.
And that's probably because I'm an introvert. I mean, I'm really happy when I'm learning, finding new things,
Same.
looking at the data or reading somebody else's ideas and integrating it into what I'm thinking. That's a real high for me. But my value has always been, and I went, I did the doctorate with the intention of helping teams get better because I had been I've been in many great teams in my youth. I've had a lot of jobs. And then as I got older and I started having professional jobs, I couldn't believe how many bad teams there were. And I couldn't believe how I would just become one of those people, one of those competitive people who lacked empathy. So anyway, my mission has always been to do the research and get it out there because I don't want people, I don't want teams underperforming. I don't want people being the ones that are left out. I want everyone to understand the high and the pride and the inclusion you feel when you're part of a great team. There's so much good research, like Sandy Pentland's. I'm so glad you found that. He published it in the Harvard Business Review. I don't know if you saw his book or where you found it, but
when I was getting certified in team facilitation, that's one of the studies that they referenced.
cool. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Good to hear.
That's how I became aware of it. And it was only just like a little snippet on a page. And I was fascinated. So then I dug a little deeper myself because I was like, I want to be able to use this information in my sessions. So
yeah, cool.
My last question for you is about your personal experience with teams. So you've mentioned that you had some when you were younger. Was there a memorable one that you were on? And I guess if you can, almost aside from all these extensive years of research, do you ever find that your anecdotal experience from being on maybe that either great team or poor team guides you? Or does it confirm what you already know? Or has it changed your personal approach?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say that I think, again, being an introvert, feeling like I'm on the outside has changed my personal approach. I think when I was watching and observing a lot of outstanding teams and I saw how everyone was in, I dug really deeply to find out how everybody got in. And so a lot of what my book is how you build that kind of getting everyone in, everyone motivated. My experiences are really built into the way I look at the data. And you'll see that in a lot of researchers. It's never, without your values. Your values color the way you see things. But the best team that I can tell you about is a research team that I was part of. And it was just phenomenal. So actually, we were brought in to Johnson & Johnson Pharmaceuticals, my colleague Steve and I. There were a smattering of people who were team facilitators, who were consultants internal to different areas of Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson is a bunch of companies. We got together and we worked together for almost 3 years studying their teams. And it just was fun. We were part of something. We listened to everyone. And we worked mostly remotely.
Oh, interesting. And you were still able to find the common thread of learning and researching and being able to improve was probably a good connector for all of you.
Yes, absolutely. The mission really drove us. And, we learned how important norms were, especially when you're meeting remotely. You need to be able to count on those routines to know what to do in certain moments.
Yeah. Well, listen, Vanessa, I thoroughly enjoyed your book. It is so comprehensive. I don't think there was a single stone left unturned. I highly recommend reading it. I think it's such a blueprint for building and maintaining successful teams. And I know that I will absolutely be incorporating some of the information that I learned into my workshops and facilitation. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for saying those nice words about the book. I feel good about that. And it's just been really a joy to talk with you today. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Catch you next time. This show is a Twisted Spur media production produced by our very own Heather McPherson. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.